We're joined in the studio this half hour by Steve Millington. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. I do want to mention, coming up after the newscast at 9 o'clock, we're expecting to be joined by Phil Kent from Pro English. And Phil is making a pitch that we should not allow any state into the United States, bring any new states in unless English is the official language. That's a reference to the Puerto Rican referendum over the weekend. Phil, I should point out, is a former president of the Georgia State Associated Press and one-time chief of staff to U.S. Senator Strom Thurmond. He'll be on the way in a short while. I also wanted to mention, too, the weather has just been 95 last week, 52 yesterday. It's been all over the place, which means you don't know if you're heating or cooling, and perhaps that unit is just getting such a workout you need some repairs. You got to call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric. They'll come out, they'll get the job done right. They'll get it done right the first time. Problem-free, cozy winters and summers are found at Ramsey Heating and Electric, 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. Give them a telephone call at 678-0459. That's Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. So tomorrow, Russ Fulcher, I just saw it this morning on Facebook. Russ Fulcher says he has a major political announcement. Now, I'm not surprised. Steve Millington, last week, Stephen Hartkin was in studio with us, and he was telling me, he said, I think you'll see Fulcher drop out of the governor's race now that Raul Labrador is in, and you'll see Fulcher then instead announce he's going to run for Labrador's congressional seat.
I think that's probably very accurate. No one knows for sure. There is a major news conference tomorrow, noonish, I think, at Fulcher's headquarters office in Meridian. And the current thinking among everybody is that, and they're basically still rumors at this point, is that Fulcher is going to withdraw from the governor's race in the state of Idaho, and he will instead announce his candidacy for the first congressional district to replace Raul Labrador in the United States Congress from that district in Idaho. So now we have two announced candidates. We have one announced candidate, David Leroy, who doesn't live in Legislative District Number 1, but will relocate there so that he can run. Then we have the strong indications, and I guess they're more than just rumors. That the leaks are everywhere that Fulcher will withdraw from the governor's race and challenge the congressional seat vacated by Labrador.
But it won't just be a two-man primary by the looks of things.
It does not look like it will. There are a couple of three names that are being batted around a lot. And frankly, I think we will see these people come to the table sooner rather than later. I think they were trying to build organizations and a game plan, an action plan to take them through the campaign season. And if Russ Fulcher does in fact, and it appears that he's going to, if he does in fact announce for the first congressional seat, these people are going to lose the advantage of time. They're going to have to jump on this process very quickly and very hard to get back in the race and catch up.
Now, when it comes to the other side, Randy Staples and I were talking about this yesterday. He said it's very unusual that you have no Democrats right now showing interest in either the governor's race or the first congressional seat. And I got in touch this morning with one of my contacts who's on that side of the aisle in Boise, and works for that side of the aisle, and still they're not even sure that they're going to see anybody come forward.
At this point, there are just no names surfacing from the Democrat side to challenge either the governor's position or the congressional seat, and I find that kind of interesting. Remember that Labrador defeated Chuck Minnick, who was a Democrat 8 years ago, and so that particular congressional district has in the past seen Democratic representation. And so I'm kind of surprised that somebody hasn't stepped up.
But the Democrat who could win in that district, Helen Chenoweth at one time was a powerhouse there. She was a very independent spirited Republican. And it seems to me any Democrat has to take that approach as well. They have to break with the party orthodoxy.
Exactly. They're going to have to. They might have a D behind their name, but they're not going to subscribe to the uh, total dialogue of the Democrat Party. They're going to have to say, we need to have better representation, and so I'm going to run as a Democrat.
See, because a Democrat could be looking at this and saying, let's let the other side pummel each other in a primary, and we can benefit from this.
Yes, and besides which, even though they may want to get name recognition and become identified, there is no requirement for them to announce and get their name on the ballot until March. So they have got a long period of time here to kind of watch this thing play out and see. And everybody makes a few verbal mistakes as they get into their campaign, and so they will be cataloging all of those errors and faux pas, and they will bring them back to just haunt whoever wins the primary election.
On the other hand, you can be like Greg Gianforte and smack around the press and still get elected. So
Yeah, exactly.
we have a short break. More with Steve Millington, the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party, on the way in just a couple of minutes. We're at 46. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. Steve Millington and I were just having a conversation off air. Kerry Hanks, who got elected to the Idaho legislature a year ago from over in eastern Idaho, she's from St. Anthony's.
That's District 35.
She has a piece today in Redoubt News, which, some Republicans who might be more middle of the road or establishment probably hear that name and say, uh-oh. But she's not, to my knowledge, a member of the Liberty Caucus. But she has a column in that particular publication today that I saw it and I thought this could really fit in any GOP platform anywhere all over the country. But she talks about the need for getting back to a smaller government and believing that that's actually more responsive to people's needs.
Well, and the primary focus of her article was, what is the proper function? What is the proper function of government? And so often we get this opinionated idea, and it's not accurate and not correct. What is the proper function of government? It is to provide for us life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or to allow us life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so, how do we make that fit? And she has some very interesting ideas. If the law takes from some people the things that belong to them and gives it to people to whom they do not belong, how does that work? What's the idea behind that?
She used the point. She said, "Look, if I what is it? If I have my car breaks down and my neighbor has three, do I go over to my neighbor and tell him you got to give me one of your cars because mine's broken?
Or do I go to my neighbor and say, can I borrow one of your cars while mine gets repaired? Then it's up to the neighbor to say, yes, you may, or no, you may not. But just to go over there and think that it's by some decree or right, you can just take one of his vehicles. No. That's not the way this deal works.
You're interesting. I saw this thing posted today, actually at Brian Zollinger's Facebook page, and he's one of her legislative colleagues.
Yes.
And I think it's Thursday. Zollinger and he's got 29 others. Their lawsuit actually goes to court on Thursday. The arguments over the grocery tax veto, the repeal that they voted for, but now Governor Otter vetoed it, and now we come back, and of course we get to revisit that Thursday.
And that's going to be an interesting little determination from the Idaho Supreme Court. Are they going to hold their position from 30 plus years ago, where that the extended time period is given to the governor, especially after the legislature adjourns? And frankly, it's a moot point. This grocery tax credit is going to be one of the first items on the agenda next go round.
Right.
And especially because, keep in mind, our next legislative session is going to be the prerequisite to a election process. The legislature meets January, February, and March. We have primary elections in mid-May. So the things that they do next year are going to be very current in people's thought process. This thing is going to hit the table first go round. They're going to pass it. The governor has 5 days to make, when the legislature's in session, he has a 5 day window. After the legislature has adjourned, he has 10 days after it reaches his desk.
We had this conversation with Representative Hartkin last week. The voters have already changed the Constitution and they've taken some power away from the governor in the last couple of years. So you've had some of those changes. If the court decides in favor, though, of the people who brought the lawsuit, the legislators who brought the lawsuit, it even makes the governor's office less
Less,
powerful.
yep, it's going to be another detraction from the governors.
Why do so many people want that job?
I don't know.
Because at the rate things are going, he or she will become a figurehead.
That'll just be somebody filling a chair, rather than and to a certain extent, and a week, was it a week ago or 2 weeks ago? Raul Labrador was on uh, the show, and one of the statements that he made was, "We have seen a lack of leadership," and so maybe the concern on the minds of voters is that we do have a quote lack of leadership unquote, and so the legislators are taking a very proactive stance and saying, we don't have any leadership in the governor's chair, we better do it in the legislature.
I know people have tried to give this impression that Butch Otter has already checked out, but I don't see that.
I got mixed emotions on that. It's hard to get him to come to a political event. I don't think that he has literally checked out, but I don't. I'm equating this with 4 years ago when all we had to do was say, "Hey, we need you here for," and he was right here. And now we say, "Where is the governor?" And he says, "Well, you're not quite as important now as you used to
Do you
be."
think that he's going to actually resign before the end of the year?
Boy, that rumor just keeps coming back and back and
I've
back.
been hearing it for a year at
And,
least.
well, and it's becoming more commonplace now than it was a year ago. Um, Maybe and maybe not. The real question now is, well, no, if it's just up to Governor Otter to make that decision, uh, then we have one set of dynamics. If that decision to resign is made from another angle, for example, if he should get called by Trump to fill some uh, federal position and have to resign to take that, um, then that forces a resignation, and Brad Little becomes governor. On the other hand, maybe Brad Little's better off to be not the governor, but the lieutenant governor, because there's a lot of people who um, are not that happy with Butch Otter because he appears to be in absentia, which he's probably not. But they're going to associate Brad Little with Butch Otter, and so, you know, it you know Otter resigns, and Brad Little becomes governor, and so uh, Butch Otter's just trying to give Brad Little a leg up to take over the governor's chair and continue on with Butch Otter's programs. And there's a lot of people who don't like that. Off air, we were talking earlier about Russ Fulcher, and in 3 years ago he ran a very successful campaign against Butch Otter, and come within, I think, 10 or so thousand votes of actually winning the primary election. And in my mind, I look at it and I say to myself, I think Russ Fulcher's people looked at the results of that election and said to themselves, "Wow, we drew this many," and I don't remember, 45, 50,000 votes. Um, we really did great. Otter only drew 55 or 60,000 votes. It was about a 10,000 vote difference there. Well, I think Fulcher's people looked at it from the wrong point of view. Those were not votes in favor of Russ Fulcher. Those were votes against Butch Otter. And so even though they, you know, I got to choose one or the other, so I'll choose Fulcher rather than Otter because I don't like him anyway.
8:51. We need to mention Steve Millington as the studio guest at the moment, and he's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. We're at 44. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I think that in the various arguments about all of this, that you mentioned Tommy Alquist is still really the wild card because, man, he has deep pockets. When it
Well,
comes down to who's got the deepest pockets,
that eventually not eventually. What we're going to see before this elections process is completed is that there's going to be a huge amount of money spent for the governor's election in the state of Idaho. And most of that money is going to be spent in the primary election. Now, that's not to say that there will be nothing spent in the general election, because the Democrats are eventually going to find someone who will step up and say, yeah, I'll take a run at it. But the real emphasis is going to be on the primary election. We're going to everybody is going to spend huge volumes of money between now and next May 15th, 19th. I don't know which day it is, 15th of May, for the primary election date. So somebody better have some really deep pockets. Now, Labrador's concern, not him individually, his campaign's people's concern is that he is not getting the contributions from places that he has in the past, because they are either, number one, simply withholding, or they have already committed to Tommy Alquist. And so Labrador is finding that the fundraising, rounding up the money for this thing, is becoming a little bit more problematic than he had thought.
and maybe because the late arrival, could we say that had something to do with it?
It could be the late arrival. However, I'm not sure that was specific. Uh, he, th- I can't, I can't get into Labrador's brain and figure out what he was thinking, but he has huge political capital. He's been a member of Congress for 6 years now. He has great political capital. His name is well known and broadcast everywhere in the state of Idaho. He should not have to worry about building name recognition, because he's been there in that particular position now and prior to that he was in the Idaho House of Representatives. And so you look at it and you say to yourself, the guy has had a great deal of public awareness. But Alquist shows up, and in less than 90 days' time, he goes from a nobody ever heard of him to polling over 20% of the total vote.
Now,
He's within the margin of error on Labrador right now.
we've got just a few minutes to go. There's a meeting tonight that's taking place with a group that calls themselves We the People of the Magic Valley. And they have a candidate who's announced for lieutenant governor named Steve Pankey. Steve's not officially a Republican, right? Is he Constitution Party or?
Not familiar with him, so I would have to issue a disclaimer on that. I have heard the name, but I don't know anything about him. And I'm guessing they're going to have that at CSI again.
This is taking place tonight. I don't know. I don't have the location in front of me. I think it's at a local restaurant. But this is an organization that has, I think, been created by a lot of what you might call dissident Republicans.
Yes. If I could be I hate to say it. They've sponsored a forum about 6 weeks ago, at which Russ Fulcher
Right.
attended.
Right.
And I knew many of the people in the room, and that's why I said it'd probably be a CSI again, because they use the free meeting room there at CSI. But don't quote me on that one, because I was not aware of this particular meeting from We the People, and I don't know that you'd call them dissidents. They're just yeah, I guess you would call them dissidents.
Well, much
They're
more
not.
constitutional style Republicans.
Yes,
They would probably be related to that liberty wing that we see now in the
I
legislature.
think that they would be very much in line with that Liberty Wing. Very much in line.
Speaking of meetings, we've got a couple of minutes to go. You've got one of those coming up as well.
Yeah, we do. We have one tomorrow night, Wednesday night, at the Planning and Zoning Conference Room in the County West buildings. Starts at 7 o'clock. We have our monthly Republican meeting, and we've got two or three interesting folks showing up. Mike Matthews, who is currently the
Acting?
acting chairman of the party, went to the National Central Committee meeting in San Diego about a month ago, and he's going to report to us on some of the goings on there and the nitty gritty and there was an awful lot of people there at that national.
Which is, going to San Diego is easier than, let's say, going to Fairbanks or
Oh yeah,
Bismarck. Yeah.
yeah. I'd rather that time of the year. I'd rather be in San Diego than Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And he said there was a lot of people telling elected officials, get off your butt and get something done. Then we have some issues coming up concerning the state central committee meeting in Coeur d'Alene on July 21 and 22. And some resolutions have been proposed and some rule changes have been proposed, and we will talk about those. There's an issue to try to change the composition of the redistricting committee. That's currently comprised of 6 people, 3 from each major party, and that doesn't work. Somebody's got to have a majority vote. So how do we arrange to have a 7-man commission or a 7-person or 5-person uh, commission so that we do not run into this constant deadlock when they make a decision? I know that we have other guests who have arranged to be present, among other um, people running for office. I know that Steve Yates is going to be there. He's going to be in Twin Falls doing other work, and so he's going to drop by Wednesday night at our meeting. And we probably will have at least 1 or 2 others. So, Planning and Zoning Conference Room, 7 o'clock tomorrow night. It's going to be an interesting meeting.
We've got a guest coming up. I want to thank Steve. We've got a guest coming up in a couple of minutes from an organization called Pro English. Phil Kent joining us. He's going to be talking about the vote in Puerto Rico the other day for statehood and why he thinks it's a bad idea. That's on the way in just fact following Fox News at 9 o'clock. We're at 43 on Top Story.